Thank you, Anis. Without wasting any time, I would just like to start off with the first keynote, which is Vamsicharan Mudiam, Strategy Leader, Cloud Computing Service, IBM India. Vamsi is a cloud computing strategy leader for IBM India. He is responsible for presenting an integrated IBM OneView for cloud computing clients and partners. We have an interesting topic by him today. It's called Smart Cloud, Directions 2012, Rethink IT, Rethink Business. So without wasting any time, I'd just like to hand it over to Vamsi.
Good morning, everyone. It's amazing to see so many people at 9:30 in Bangalore. Maybe the petrol hike is actually making sure that not many people take their cars out. But it's really good, heartening to see. And I was telling my marketing guy, 9:30 a.m., first speaker slot, and we're going to speak to the bleachers. And he said, no, don't worry, there are going to be enough people. So thank you all for taking time out. I'm sure you have a wonderful 2 days understanding what's happening with cloud, both in the industry, from a vendor, from a consumer perspective. What I thought I would do in the next 20, 25 minutes is really not to talk about cloud. I'm sure you have 2 days full of cloud technology discussions which will happen. What I would rather focus is just set the tone of why cloud, why is it that relevant, what's happening in the minds of the business leaders that makes cloud a very important part of the IT strategy for a lot of businesses, cutting across industries and sectors, right? If I can get this working. Okay. So this is a sort of a slide I just wanted to put up and talk about the 4 aspects which are happening today if you're running a business, right? There is obviously one aspect which is globalization, and the second one is a demographic shift. The third one is around the connectivity or the mobility and social networking, which is connecting a lot of us in ways and means which we've not imagined before. And last but not the least, all of them driving a huge amount of data explosion, right? And so what are CEOs thinking, right? Just to set the tone, right, and from where I'm coming with this, we just announced as IBM the latest CEO study results. So over the last 8 years, we've been doing something called a CEO study. We've reached out to about, totally we've reached out about 18,000 odd CEOs. And these are some of the thoughts which they have shared. And one of the, overriding, message which is coming out is everyone is now looking at embracing this connectedness. While there are multiple external factors which are impacting a business today, technology seems to be one of the most important and most relevant aspect which is driving a lot of change inside organizations. And we'll go a bit and talk about this. One of the 3 key, I just picked up 3 key insights, a lot more insights, and they're available on the IBM website. The CEOs are creating more open and collaborative cultures, right? They basically are trying to cut the barriers down from ability for employees and customers and partners to talk to them, converse with them, give feedback, and take feedback and react to it, right? So one way basically is to provide a lot of analytical muscle to the employees itself to ensure that they're able to respond in a more meaningful fashion to some of the connected queries which are coming. And last but not the least, they're also working with a lot of partners to basically put this IT into their premises, right? If you look at this is a very, very nice chart. I sort of wanted to like it. And these are from 2004 to 2012. These are some of the external forces which are impacting the organization as per the CEOs, right? And there are a lot of them which are geopolitical, environmental, socio-economic, etc. But if you look at the top 3, right, while there's ups and downs of market factors, obviously market is the most important element because you're selling into or buying from it. And people skills, which is, do you have enough people to run it? The most important one, which has been steadily climbing up from the last 8 years is technology factors. You know, it was number 6, went to number 3, stayed at number 3 in the last 2 surveys. The last but one survey, it went to number 2. And today, it is a number 1 external force which CEOs are saying is impacting their business. So most of you are IT people, so we are in good shape, right? You know, we control some of these things which is impacting the businesses, you know, wherever you are. So there is, if you look at the last 3 slides, what I said is, you know, CEOs are worried about how this connected nature and this data explosion and this globalization is going to impact their businesses. They also believe that technology is going to be the biggest, you know, influencer, external influencer, which is going to basically impact their business. So what does it mean, you know? And, you know, I'm trying to jump from technology as general to cloud just because it's Cloud Connect, otherwise there are multiple factors in that. But if you look at cloud as a technology factor and how it will impact the business, compared to about 2 years ago where 16% of folks were saying, you know, I want to basically use cloud beyond, you know, bottom line revenue, you know, bottom line expense cutting to basically top line revenue generation. What people are saying is, you know, my cloud adoption strategy is not limited to basically cutting down costs, but actually doing something beyond cutting down costs, which is, you know, the things around change industry role, redesign industry, and new business. So people are constantly trying to use cloud for not just basically infrastructure optimization or operational optimization, but they're also actively looking at how can I basically use cloud as a new revenue generation or new revenue stream in my enterprise. And I'll get to it towards the bottom of my presentation on more specifics around the buckets of adoption. And, you know, I borrowed this from Forrester. They were kind enough to share with me. You know, cloud in India and across this region is a very important priority for CIOs. While we look at CEO angle and they looking at technology as an important factor, and obviously pushing the CIOs to make sure the technology works for them, the CIOs look at, you know, cloud to be an important strategy or important priority in their planning. So we asked the question, they asked the question, you know, how many of you are going to create a comprehensive cloud or as a service strategy or adoption or migration plan? We had in India, if you look at about 144 participants, 56% of them were saying that, and, you know, all respondents about 38%. And a bit more detail, you know, when we ask them, you know, how many of you are already adopting? You look at this number, right? In India, we were at about 13% adopters in 2010, and the current survey says about 26% adopters. It's a huge growth. You know, we are experiencing huge amount of growth, and if you look at between those who have already adopted cloud solution and those who are obviously going to adopt or planning to adopt, there's a huge percentage growth year on year in these. So it's top down, guys. You know, it's not something, cloud is no more an IT exercise where a bunch of IT folks are getting together and say, oh, let's try this new technology and let's put something on our resumes, but it's going top down. The CEOs are feeling the impact. They believe that technology is going to be a very important external factor for them to be in their business. The CIOs are getting a lot of pressure, and CIOs have chosen cloud to be one of the topmost priorities for them to be creating a strategy or putting together a migration or adoption strategy for themselves or already adopting it, right? And why are we talking about, I'm sure this is a no-brainer slide for most of you, but I just thought I'll put it here in case there is a cloud novice here. Why is it all different? You know, simple, right? You know, we're basically talking about ability to ensure that there is an operational efficiency which is brought into the IT system, which can drastically change the way we use IT. You know, before I took on this role, I used to work in the lab in IBM. You know, I used to be part of a lab, and one of the biggest problems I had, and I used to buy $1 million worth of capital infrastructure because I did to support my softwares on, you know, VAS, X number of WebSphere application versions, DB2, Oracle, and then RISC platforms, Intel platforms. And we used to buy this huge amount of hardware year on year because we needed to test more and more versions of the software, and we also needed to support. And as a manager, as head of a unit who was trying to run this or do this, the biggest problem was if a guy comes to me in the morning and asks for a machine, I know that day is going to be bad because now I need to go and scrounge around where the machine is the machine available for someone to use, can I use it, who will use it, how can I use it, what applications are running, how do I move the thing around. Today, with cloud, we're completely changing the mode of operations. Today, I don't need to go and scrounge around. I just go to a portal, I ask for a machine, depending on its availability, I know it's available, I know where it's available, and I tell it what I want basically to be installed on this, and it installs. So from months or weeks, it's coming down to days and hours, and you see everything is changing, right? The dynamics of time and flexibility which is given by cloud is basically making it that meaningful for the CIOs. And just to set the common understanding for everyone all through the next 2 days, this is something I think across vendors, all of us have finally agreed that this is what we'll call them. And rest of us, each vendor has a different name for a solution, but these are the nomenclature which we have said. There's something called a private cloud, which is built inside the premise or specifically for a specific customer. There's something called a public cloud, which is basically something which is offered by a set of providers, and you buy it as a service. And most of the time, it is not necessarily in your premises. You purchase it from a third-party solution. And the last one, obviously, below is a traditional IT. Now, the world is not going to be one of these, right? The world is going to be all of these. You probably have some applications running on a traditional IT and some applications which are going to be things you want to move into a private cloud because you see the optimization which offers is better. And then there's some applications you just say, I don't want to really even have it in my enterprise, just let me buy it from a third-party provider. So you probably have your ERP on your traditional IT, your accounting on a private cloud, and maybe you're buying CRM from a third-party provider or email from a third-party provider. It doesn't mean that these three can run in silos. And today, the biggest problem which I come across when I'm talking to CIOs is while their adoption strategy is there and they want to do something, one of the important things which they come to realization later on in the cycle is, okay, now if I do this on the cloud, how does it really align with my rest of the IT governance? What is the change management which is going to impact? How do I ensure that things which are under my control today do not go out of it? And this is where the whole hybrid IT infrastructure is coming together, where you'll have these things interconnected through a sort of solutions and offerings, so that your IT governance is pervasive across these three different types of consumption of IT. It boils down to how you consume IT, right? Whether it's private, public, or traditional IT. It's all about a consumption model. In a private cloud, you consuming it specifically for you, high amount of customization allowed, but obviously you'll have some amount of capital expenditure because you're building it specifically for you. In a public cloud, it is not that customizable, but it's something which you can buy at a very low OpEx or a pay-as-you-use mode. But everything which is massively produced and provided comes in standard sizes, so the customization is not there. And traditional IT is something you have built over time, right? So these are three different consumption models which you're trying to bring together. And this is where you see people going ahead, that ability to move workloads between private to public and public to private, and ability to manage them as if it's a central IT governance is the key going ahead, right? And you'll see through the day, a lot of speakers will be covering that from different places. Now, I spoke about what the CEOs are thinking, and the fact that technology is a big external factor which CEOs are expecting to change the business. I spoke about how, from a technology choices, CIOs have picked up cloud to be the most important priority for them in the years to come. And I also spoke about what are the different types of consumption models available because of cloud. Now, I would just want to spend a few minutes in terms of how this adoption is happening, right? Over the past few years, we've been seeing certain patterns emerge in how people buy cloud, right? Prominently, there are 4 buckets which I would want to call, right? The first 3 buckets predominantly are a set of people who are basically looking at cloud to, operationally optimize or operationally make their IT flexible, which is basically, again, cutting down costs or cutting down or having a predictable cash flow for their infrastructure or software spend. And the last one is the important one, where a set of companies who are looking at how they can make money using cloud. They range across banks, they range across telcos, data center providers, system integrators, ISVs, who are all looking at cloud as an enabler for a greater revenue generating model. There are a bunch of people who are looking at their IP which they have developed over years, and how do I put on the cloud and I make it from a cost IP to a profit IP. A good example I can give from my own IBM experience is, IBMers sitting here will relate to it. for years we have been using a tool called expense reimbursement engine, which is both a pain and a sort of good thing in our lives, because every time I travel, I go back to IBM and then my Amex card is synced up with this tool, and then I pull those expenses and claim the expenses. And we said, this is something which is common across a lot of companies, right? Whether you're IT or any company which is sending people out to basically do business for them, will need to provide them a way to basically get that money they spend for the company back. So we took that passive IT asset, which was a internal IT asset, put it on the cloud, and today we sell it as business process as a service, wherein companies can come and buy this this expense reimbursement as a service. They usually buy it per employee or basically give us a percentage of the reimbursement. So this is, I'm just giving an example where some of the companies are looking at their IP and IT assets which they have developed for years for their internal use and putting it out onto the cloud to see how they can generate revenue from it. And the first three are no-brainers. I'm not going to spend too much time. There are a bunch of people who are looking at infrastructure optimization. These are people who are looking at effectively managing their virtualized environments and having an amount of self-service, etc., which governs it so that they can actually allocate and meet with the consumption demand which is coming from their end users. And there are also a set of people who are going beyond just infrastructure virtualization and looking at how application virtualization and how platform availability can be made as can be used. And again, as I said, this is both in a private and a public construct where people are trying to use this. And last but not the least, there are a bunch of people who are looking at software as a service as an answer for quicker procurement of some of the software assets, and also reducing the total cost of ownership of their software assets because of the maintenance and staff retention, etc. So there are companies which are doing one of them, there are companies which are doing some of them, there are companies which are doing all of them. So if you look at a telco, some of the telcos in the country are speaking to me about doing all of them. The first three for their own internal IT, because telco has a huge IT arm, and the last one for how they can extend their existing relationship with their customers, cutting across SMBs, individual customers, etc. And they're also selling broadband and dongles. How can I basically leverage that customer base I have and that connect I have and ability to bill in micro hundreds and a couple of hundred rupees to actually step into IT domain, going after they enter the market with voice, they're now doing data. Now with voice and data, can I also do IT as a service? So this is what is happening today, and these are the four broad buckets. Obviously, this is not exhaustive, but you can relate to these four buckets as sort of adoption patterns. Now I thought I'll give some examples. Then I said, through the day, different people will be giving different examples of customers. I thought IBM is a big company itself, and we have a huge internal IT, right? I'm not talking about IBM as a vendor, but IBM as a consumer of IT, because our CIO's office is one of the largest CIO's office. And I said, we have done a lot of things on cloud, right? And this is a white paper which hopefully is there in your bags. I request you all to go through it. It's a very interesting white paper where it says, how did we succeed and why success in the cloud is largely driven by workloads. There's an old mentor of mine who gives me this example of, a crude example, but he always asks me, are you the dog or the tail? Right? A lot of times when it goes to cloud, we forget the fact that the cloud is a tail, right? The dog is still the workload which you want to run on the cloud. If you do the things other way around, you have major issues coming in. If you think cloud is going to solve the scalability of a monolith problem, sorry, it's not going to beyond a point, right? So understand the dog and then fix the tail. Or understand the workload, try to pick the right workload, and then use cloud as an enabler, as an the top message which comes out with this particular white paper. So workloads have multiple meanings to people, and depending on who you are and what type of management responsibility you have. But broadly, these are individual pieces of functions and features which are helping your company or a line of business from an IT perspective, and you'll automatically sit down. If you sit down and jot down, what I tell people is, don't jot down application names, ERP, accounting, etc. Jot down the function which you're doing, because when you start jotting down functions, you'll probably see beyond a single application, and then you'll see the amount of integration you have to that application, and then you'll probably be able to choose the right consumption model. Just because an application is available in a public cloud doesn't mean you go and jump onto that and buy it, but depending on the amount of customization you've done and the amount of integration you've done to that application to work for a function, the higher level function will actually define whether what type of consumption model is better. Should you leave it in traditional IT, or should you move to private, or should you move to a public cloud environment? Some of the things which we spoke about, if you look at the two axes, one is the gain by moving into cloud, and the deployment is. There are a lot of them, which you can gain. It is a simple cost-benefit analysis, right? There's no great, message here, but it's a simple cost-benefit analysis. I was giving you the example of the cloud which we built in the lab. So the first time I tried to do it, I asked the guy, operations guy, how many operating systems do we support in the lab? They said 382. I'm like, 382, if I have to automate each one of them, the gain I gain by automating all this is going to be erased by the pain of creating this automation, right? It's not that easy to create automation workflows with 382 versions. So what you need to understand is what is the best workload which will give you the high return and also is the easiest to deploy, and that's what is basically shown in this cycle. What did we gain? These are some of the snippets from what we did as an IBM corporation for our internal IT. Today, one of the biggest showpiece we have is how we have consolidated all our financial reporting tools into one tool which runs on a mainframe with Cognos. Rather than different countries using their own formats and CFO's office trying to consolidate before the quarter end and trying to report it, we now are in a situation where all of us use the same tool, and depending on which time you work, you get an instance and you basically use it, and have been able to reduce a lot of expense and more importantly increase the productivity of the set of people. Right? There are other things which we do in terms of how some of the marketing and campaign management tools which we sell to customers are basically transforming the way our marketing departments reach out and create and manage the campaigns. The rest of them you can see. The last one I want to talk about, right? Basically the way cloud is impacting is also around how we basically use our end user devices, how we use our test and development machines, and how basically transforming these into cloud is saving us a lot of not just money, but space, power, and increased productivity. Because a good anecdote I want to give, in IBM we had a program called Technology Adoption Program. About 4 or 5 years ago, I used to be part of this program which used to be run. Technology Adoption Program, in a very brief, is basically IBM management said, okay, you got about 3 lakh plus employees. Let's assume 10% of them are really smart, and out of the 10%, there are enough number of people who want to do something beyond their day jobs, and let's go and get that basically day jobs, inquisitiveness or innovativeness captured to create new products. So in the past, we used to basically give out machines to people, so you could go to a portal and say, look, I want to build this extension to this product. So we used to give out a machine to that person. Now you know what happens when you give a machine to a developer, it never comes back to you. Right? It's always somewhere there in ether. Everyone wants to use it always. But eventually, the cost of supplying these machines defeated the whole purpose of this program. So then we moved it out and said, let's put it in a data center, and let's start basically providing access to these people from this data center. And that's when we hit on this whole cloud concept wherein if we virtualize and give them and control the ability to give them access to the machine only for the time they need, that is where the whole optimization of the self-service kicked in, and we are able to save a lot more money and power and real estate because of consolidating that. The last 2 slides, or a few slides which I have, I just wanted to talk about what is going to impact an IT department. This is something called a component business model, a CBM, which is something which IBM has created for a lot of industries, and IT itself is an industry. If you look at the vertical columns, there are different types of features or functions or broad categories under which you can fall, the IT relationship, business strategy, admin, etc. And the horizontal are the different roles you play, right? Are you directing, are you controlling, are you the runner? Are you basically putting out a strategy for IT, Are you basically monitoring and managing this IT, or are you actually executing this IT? And if you look at that, and these are different modules which are there in a typical IT shop, right? It is not a sector-specific IT shop. It's if you are a CIO's office, what is it you are doing? You're doing a lot of planning and communication. You're doing a lot of management and systems management. You're doing a lot of strategy. You're deploying, etc. So what we did is, we did a study and said which of these components become more relevant and which of these components become less relevant as cloud comes more and more into vogue, right? So as you see, the gray boxes are some things which, while they are relevant, are becoming less important because the automation and the ability to do self-service and the quickness of provisioning a machine reduces the need for an elaborate time spent in terms of how do you deploy or how do you provision, etc. Whereas because of all these basic automation, etc., things like service demand, service management strategy, and how do you manage relationship with your vendor because you're now going outside your enterprise to consume IT. They become more and more important. So if you're a CIO or if you're an IT person, this is what our future looks like. You'll be spending, I'm not saying this, the ones in gray are irrelevant. I'm just giving a view of how much time you would be spending as an IT professional or IT manager as you start adopting more and more cloud, right? So the majority of the current job roles remain, albeit a bit much reduced scope or importance in some areas. Fewer strategic roles are, if you look at it, from a strategic perspective, very few strategic roles are impacted. More and more tactical and operational roles are impacted. Build and run are the main casualties because now you either have a very smooth self-service automated private cloud or you're buying these services from public cloud provider. And more, against that, ability to plan and commercial skills are going to become important because now as I said, your consumption model is beyond your IT, internal IT, but going across to multiple other people. The last slide I want to touch upon on IBM, we basically address this market in 3 different formats, and you'll hear more and more in the sessions by different IBMers about what we do. For all those people who are looking at building private and managed cloud, we have something called the Smart Cloud Foundation, which is basically where we play the role of an arms supplier of hardware and software and services to people to help them build it. Then there is a set of offerings we have in the Smart Cloud Services. Smart Cloud Services, as the name goes, is our ability to provide managed or software or public cloud services to you as a consumer of PaaS and IaaS, etc., from a public managed cloud. And the last one, we also have some industry solutions which we're creating to basically address specific industry segments rather than just pieces of functional IT, which is there in the foundation and services component. So with that, basically, I just want to summarize saying, time has come to rethink and reinvent business. How does your organization feel about the change which is impacting them or the various factors of change? How do you want to address that? As you've seen in the previous slides, technology is the most important factor, external factor which CEOs are telling us is impacting the business, and CIOs who are actually execution of this strategy believe that cloud is a very important tool in their hand to actually address this particular external impact which is impacting them. With that, I would like to thank you for your time and all the best, and hope you have a great 2 days of sessions on cloud. Thank you.
Thank you, Vamsi. Just a minute, Vamsi. Just a minute.
Sure.
I would just like to request the audience, if there are any questions, you can address it now to Vamsi, or he's there at the venue. I mean, you can catch up with him. Are there any questions we can take? Okay. On behalf of IBM India and the Cloud Connect team, we'd just like to hand over a small moment of our appreciation to Mr. Vamsi.